Hey everybody, Jordan here, the PH is silent, and in this episode of the Saturday Morning D&D Show, we talk about theater of the mind, as well as how do you get your players to like that new RPG. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Saturday Morning D&D Show. My name is Jordan, with a silent PH in the middle, and I am joined always by my wonderful co-host, Sir Lucian, over there at Sir Lucian Gaming. Say hello, sir.
Hello, everybody. Looks like we got a few people streaming in now. I'm sure they'll all just start piling in and be ready for our Saturday morning D&D show. But I bet it's pretty nice out, so I bet some people are out doing yard work.
Oh
too.
man, it's like beautiful where I live, and I need to do all of the yard work.
All of it.
It's been so rainy. Not that this is the Weather Channel. We're going to talk about the weather, but it's been so rainy that I can't mow the lawn. And so I think today is the day that I'm going to have to do that. But yeah, we are a Dungeons and blah, 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 words. We are a Dungeons and Dragons talk show, and we kind of talk about the games that we're playing and the news of D&D. And there isn't a ton of news, so we're probably going to dive into a lot of our games today. But what news do we have today to talk about?
Well, we looked around. Dungeons and Dragons didn't have too much, but I did see one thing that I thought was interesting is we've been talking about the Descent. We've been talking about the new big live event that's coming out. We've been talking about the new book that's about to drop. And the one thing I noticed, we had talked a tiny bit about it last week, were all the new people that were being invited. So we had YouTubers and streamers. But the thing that I thought I would bring up this morning was it seemed like there was a lot of the podcast people. When I went to the podcast list, there was a lot more podcast shows listed than there was here's the group of people that are the YouTube shows, or here's the group of people that are the stream shows, or any of that. And so I thought it was really interesting. It felt like this year they must have decided to make a push on the podcast front and really bring in a lot of those people, which I think is pretty cool.
I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think. I think they've always really encouraged the podcasting, because I'm looking back to it was the one for Tomb of Annihilation in Seattle, and it was. I don't think it had a name other than it was just like the D&D live stream. But they had like the Dragon Friends who are from Australia, who came up from Australia to go to Seattle to do that live show. Yeah. And I love the Dragon Friends. They're awesome, which is interesting that they are back, because I've been listening a lot to their podcasts, and they haven't been playing D&D for quite a while. They've switched over to other games, and currently they're playing a Harry Potter one-page RPG that is just hilarious. But yeah, Dragon Friends, they're really awesome. But a lot of those podcasts are live streams, like the Venture Maidens, and I can't think of any others off the top of my head. But in the past, I don't think we got as many YouTubers. Matt Colville was just really popular, so they invited him. And they invited his name is Trump. He's a Hearthstone streamer, but apparently he plays a lot of D&D as well, and he was invited to that. But I don't know. I always feel like podcasting is where the majority of the people they brought was. And I thought it was really cool that they've kind of branched out, and they got some not lesser known, but it's not about subscriber count. Like, we'll invite you to this if you have over 100,000 subscribers, because they invited people like Ted from Nerd Immersion, who's like been a really good champion of this community. And I'm just really excited that he gets to go with his channel, Nerd Immersion, who I think they have like maybe 5,000, 10,000 subscribers. So yeah, but he's been making D&D content for so long and doing a lot of Twitch stuff. So
yeah, one thing I kind of hope they had done, because I'm sure they have a little bit of money bags to do this, because they're just printing money at this point. It seemed like when you bring up Ted, they are bringing in Ted from Nerd Immersion, but it's not like his cast from one of his shows. It's Ted, right?
Yeah.
Or even some of the other ones, like the Plot Hunters I just noticed, or some of the other ones. I think they're sending like a person, but not like the whole crew is getting to go, as far as I could tell. Like, some of them are that way, but not all of them are the full cast of those shows. And I really think, why not just bring in the full cast of one of those shows? So if you can bring in, Ted, bring in one of his games groups, bring them in, bring in the Plot Hunters, bring in, all these different people. Unless maybe they were offered and people couldn't go. Maybe that's the thing. Maybe there's not that transparency as far as we know who's been invited or who wasn't able to go because of what. I think there was a couple people that got invited but couldn't go due to scheduling. So I'm sure that happens too.
Yeah,
so. But I think it'd be cool that if you are going to bring in these groups, just bring in that full group. Might as well bring them in, have them fun. And it felt like Stream of Many Eyes was a very big Twitch push, though. Like, I know you're talking about the Stream of Annihilation one. I think you're right. But the last one they did felt like a real big, we're a Twitch kind of thing. And I think they want to make sure they put the foot forward that we're not just this Twitch. This is not just a Twitch event. This is not just this is a live event. This is a Twitch and YouTube event. This is a podcast event. There'll be podcast rooms. They're really, the whole media gambit is gonna be represented, which I think is cool. It's great that their company's big enough to push that forward and they're willing to do that, because we're not seeing a lot of that stuff from the other ones. I mean, there's some other big companies out there, like Monty Cook's big enough to maybe kind of start to attempt something like that. Maybe a Paizo, maybe a Cobalt Press. Maybe these other ones are starting to get big enough and have a big enough stable of products that they could start doing some of the stuff that Wizards does. But Wizards is really good about including its community and stuff, and going out and finding the people that are like what they do and promote their stuff and work with them. So I think they're doing a really good job. I'm surprised more of the big name role play groups out there, or at least producers or designers, aren't doing more of that. They do a little bit of it, but it just doesn't seem like it's enough. I feel like they should do a little more. So,
I don't know.
But that's going to be in May. So we're halfway through April now. So we're getting close. We're probably a month away from getting to see what that is. That's going to be one I'll probably watch through the whole thing and just see all the cool stuff that's going on, which I think is going to be cool. The only other thing I noticed was I'm pretty sure it's confirmed that WebDM is sniping our shows now, because me and you had a big discussion last Saturday about mass battles. And then all of a sudden, WebDM has a mass battle video conspiracy. Maybe, I'm thinking,
because they don't plot out, they don't record their shows months in advance.
That's all the joke, so. Because it's still a conspiracy. It still could be a possibility. So
we need the I Want to Believe posters, but with like WebDM and Saturday Morning D&D Show on there or something.
Yeah. I had one idea about that. This idea of, if you have a big block of, so you make your block of units like you do. So this one has 60 persons in it, or whatever they are. So it's whether it's 60 goblins or 60 human spearmen or whatever it is. And you have 60 and 40 and 50. So you let your players, they just automatically hit because they can't miss a block. And all they do is they just roll damage. And however much damage they roll is how many people you take out of that unit. So fireball hits, 47 points of damage, 47 people are removed from that unit. And just let it, oh, okay, that's half the unit, they run away. And then just go full bore with that kind of idea. I thought that'd be an interesting, fun way just to quickly go through that.
I did that kind of, well, not completely the same. I kind of said like each character has a certain amount of health, and then I gave them that health. But I did do that mechanic where if they got below half health, it was like half our guys are gone. Are they going to fight to the death, or are they going to run away? And I'd make morale checks for them to see if they would stay or not, because I thought that was interesting. And another cool thing, like Dungeon Crawl Classics actually has that in the mechanics of the game, that if you have 6 goblins and 3 of them die, you are then at the top of the round, make a morale check to see if the other 3 goblins either fight to the death or run away, because it is just kind of like, well, no, they're outnumbered at that point. They're going to probably try to get out of there. So you kind of know when you're losing. So
yeah, I think that's a big point that gets missed when anybody talks about the ways they might handle mass combat. Is I think you definitely have a mechanic for morale. I mean, that's the thing that decides if they stay and they go, and when they should stay and when they should go. And it's like a full-time warfare thing that you might not get in the little battles that you get with your adventurers first monsters. Although, like you said, you could, but definitely in mass battles, that is a huge, and morale is everything. So that's a big mechanic to remember for if you're doing those. So I thought it was funny. I thought I'd point that out, that they did a video that we had been talking about. Other than that, the Monty Cook Kickstarter wrapped up. I know this is one that you actually have backed. So
did you not back it?
I didn't on this one, because you said something when we were talking about in the show. When it first came out, I was excited, but they hadn't listed what the other PDFs were. Because they did this Kickstarter differently, like you said, was that there were going to be stretch goals that were more books, not just little things, but like a full-on new book. And then I was like, well, how do I know which one I want? And then everything went by so fast, I never actually jumped back in there. The nice thing about Kickstarters like this, I was just on their page earlier, it looks like you still can get in on things even if the Kickstarter's done. It feels like you can still get pledges, or you can still purchase things at certain prices. Maybe some of the things are gone, like some of the discount steps that you could do, but it feels like you still can participate in some way, or even still get the books and the PDFs now that you can see that the full Kickstarter's done. So.
Yeah, I think the PDFs will at least be available. And so that's why, like, you were asking me before we started the show, like, did you change your pledge to get any of those extra books? And I didn't. I just got the core main Arcana of the Ancients book, because that's the one I was interested in. And the rest of them are, like, some of them are monster manuals and other things that they were pushing. But I feel like I could get those later as a PDF, and I don't necessarily need the hardback book of it, which is what I wanted. But there was a tier in his Kickstarter that I think was like $60, and it was $60 and you get every PDF. And I was like, that's a pretty good deal to get, like, and that was if you were interested in just the content, then you could have gotten every PDF for $60 or something. So
and as I'm looking at right now, their 100K got them the Beast of Flesh and Steel. 135 got a new adventure added. The 185 was the deluxe core book unlock. More Arcana of the Ancients. Beneath the Monolith was another adventure, another new adventure. So like a lot of these adventure books or campaign setting kind of books using the Numenera kind of world stuff. So there was a bunch in there, and I think they crushed all of their everything they had. So they got up to a total of
like 500,000, like 500,000 or something.
Yeah, and so their last stretch goal was 500K. So they got everything they were looking for, which is how Monty Cook does things. They'll do this print, and if they ever want to do a reprint, they'll do another Kickstarter, and that's how they kind of do their books, just so they're only printing out what's needed. And the books are high quality. The artwork is fantastic. They're a professional group of RPG makers. I love the stuff they're putting together, and it's great that it's 5e, because I mean, me and you are playing a ton of 5e right now, and we can't ever get enough 5e books.
I think that's why and we talked about this before, but it's their dip into 5e. Like, why try and make more Numenera content when we have all of this intellectual property that we could then use for, like, literally the most popular role-playing game out right now, and we'll just make a supplement for that. And I was like, that it makes a lot of sense. So I'm excited. I'm really, really excited for just more sci-fi options in D&D 5e. So, because obviously that's my game of choice. I play that quite a bit.
I'm still waiting for you to do a Spelljammer game. And
oh man,
wouldn't the Numenera stuff fit so good in the Spelljammer stuff?
It would help. It would be awesome.
Would be really good.
I want to do more Spelljammer videos. I was actually working on some videos this morning, and I'm like, I need to, like, dive into Spelljammer again, because the one video I made of the different planets in the Faerun crystal sphere, or the Forgotten Realms crystal sphere, a lot of people liked that video, and I was like, oh well, Spelljammer's a little more popular than I thought it was. Maybe I'll make some more Spelljammer videos. So
you should gotta be watching Matt Colville's The Chain, because in it, not that it's a Spelljammer campaign, he has a Mind Flayer ship, and he's used the artwork from a Spelljamming campaign somewhere, and now somebody has 3D printed him a full size to sit on the table.
Wow.
Yep. That is the full-on Mind Flayer ship, and it is super cool looking. So
that is awesome.
They've been doing some really good stuff over on that. If you haven't caught their campaign yet, the Colville campaign is really good. But other than that, we had talked a couple shows ago, and maybe even a little bit last show, and I just thought I'd bring it around again. We were excited that the Act Inc. show that was happening at PAX East, was it? No, it was PAX.
Yeah.
Yeah, PAX East. That's right. Yeah.
The one in Boston.
That one, that we'd heard that the game went really good with the Acquisitions Incorporated live show, but we hadn't really seen what it was yet. What was on, I saw it show up finally on the YouTubes at this point, and I started watching a little bit of it, and just even the first part of it was really good. As the start of the whole episode is them getting spit out of a worm butt. So that's just how it goes right from there. It gets crazy with Jeremy Crawford being the GM for that, and It's pretty good. It's a pretty fun episode, and I haven't got through it all yet, but I'm waiting to get to the big thing that happens at the end. So it's supposed to be pretty fantastic. So you can find that out there. We're seeing more information about the Acquisitions Inc. book for 5e, and that one has me super excited. I can't wait to buy this book. I know you're excited about the Saltmarsh book, so it's just a good time here in April as the snows are starting to melt away, the warm weathers are starting to come back, but that's still a good time for D&D players because we still are going to be playing, even if it is
that Acquisitions Incorporated, like Saltmarsh comes out in May, right?
Right.
But I think the Acquisitions Incorporated book doesn't come out till June or July.
June. Yeah, I think it's a June one. Yep.
Yeah. So I pre-ordered it on Penny Arcade's website because I really wanted the pin that it comes with a free pin, and I was like, and then I saw like how its price on Amazon typically is cheaper, and so I was just like, Jordan, you're paying like an extra $15 just for this pin, but I was like, but I really want the pin, so I went through the Penny Arcade store and got the pin because I want to add it to my dice bag. I want to like load this thing up with pins, which I was talking to Celeste from the Venture Maidens, and she's like, you need a Venture Maiden pin. And I was like, well, bring one to Gen Con and I'll trade you a Saturday morning D&D show pin for one. It'll be awesome.
That's right. Last year we gave around, for those of you fans that caught up with Jordan, saw him walking around the show floor, they were lucky enough to get a pin that he gave out to them.
Which I'll have more for this next Gen Con as well. So
yeah. Bring those Sharpies because I hear he wants to sign people's foreheads for some reason.
No. No, please no.
But that was it. So really, in reality, even though we just talked about that for 16 minutes or so, it was a slow week of news. I think they're getting everything set up for the big streams that are coming. Everybody's shows are either it feels like we're in this wrapping down of the shows that started near January, and they're the shorter campaigns that maybe have run for a couple of months, but now they're getting ramped up to start the new campaigns of stuff. If you've seen on a lot of the other Twitch shows, it seems like they're kind of in that transition of moving around from shows. Or storylines are starting to end and a new storyline starting to pick up, or a new chapter, however they do them. So it all feels like this good, fresh thing that's happening in the community right now. So we'll keep our eyes out. If we see anything else news-wise, we'll keep you guys informed.
We will. So other than news, I played a lot of games, and I think you played a lot of games. So what have you been doing in the world of Dungeons and Dragons?
Well, this was another player week, so I didn't run a game this week. I did a player because I wanted to feel out my new schedule of all the games I'm playing at the moment. So that was cool. So this is Player Lucian for today's episode. And Wednesday night, we played our first Tomb of Annihilation session where, and it's funny, both GMs in my Wednesday and Thursday games are from Australia. So I have two Australian GMs.
What time is it for them to play? Like, is it early?
Well, it's like in the afternoon for them.
Oh,
so
okay.
It was there's somewhere anywhere from 12 to 14 hours difference depending on where they are. And so it fits just almost like, look at your clock and it's like, oh, it's 12:18 at night there. And it was really, so that's the running joke now, is for me to get a game to play in, I have to go find Australian GMs. But it's cool because they're really good. And the cool thing is, the Wednesday game is Tomb of Annihilation. I get to pick up again where one of my campaigns that I was playing in over on a Narcissus channel had ended, and we hadn't quite got through the whole thing. And as you know, even me, if you play some of the Wizards of the Coast adventures, these books can span a couple of years of gameplay, really. I mean, you can take Tomb of Annihilation on, and it could take you 2 years to really complete it. It could take you, Storm King's Thunder could go for 2 years easy. Some of these ones are pretty big, so there's no dig at, not completing. But I was a little sad that I didn't get to go through. We didn't even actually get into the tomb at that point.
Yeah.
So we didn't get to the Tomb of Annihilation. We did all the jungle stuff before that. And I won't spoil it too much for those of you who haven't played it yet. So this new campaign, I jumped right on when they said we're going to start up Tomb of Annihilation, and we're going to fast track our way to the tomb to get to that portion of the campaign. We'll start at 6th level, and we'll get our characters going and everything. So over the past 2 weeks, I've been getting a 6th level War Mage going. We talked a little bit about last week. I love starting characters at this 5th and actually even 6th level seems so good, because you get all of the signature things you need typically to feel like the character you think you're making. right? So at first level, you might be saying, I have this cool character concept that eventually this character is going to be like an Iron Man character, right? We'll take one of your old styles back from the day. But at first level, it doesn't quite feel like Iron Man yet, right? You got to have a few of these abilities before you kind of finesse it into, now it can kind of feel like this Iron Man kind of cool thing. Well, 6th level feels like that area for me. It's just that perfect. I've got everything I need to make this War Mage. So I've got this really cool War Mage concept going on, straight out of Xanthar's Guide. The group is really good, but this is definitely a group of all the players are min-maxers. All the players are number crunchers, and all of the players took a bunch of time making sure they were thinking about synergy between the abilities of the other players in the group. So this group is like totally twinking it out, right? So this is like full on. So I feel sorry for the GM, because I know as a GM, when you get your twink characters in there, it just blows up all of your encounter. Like if you try to do a CR rating with this group, it won't work.
Yeah.
You better just double the CR for this group, because they're looking at every type of buff and debuff and how it synergizes with something else. And somebody puts a fire on one thing first so that this other person gets more damage, because anything that's on fire does more damage type thing. And so they're just looking at it that way. But they're a fun group, and they're really good role players. They're all friends of mine, and we're having a really good time with this game. The question I had out of it, because I've been having so much fun, for Jordan, what is that best spot for you? Because you play a lot of characters right now, a lot of different campaigns, one-shots and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the funnest starting point for a character when you're a player first? So as a player, what's the spot you like to make your character at?
Well, so there's something to be said for... Okay, I'll give you... So starting at level 1 is awesome, because you get more attached to that character as he's leveling up, and you get to like kind of see what's happening to him. And then also there's a chance of getting magic items that could also augment like what your character is doing. But if I think my favorite is starting at level 5, because level 5 feels like I'm not going to die in one hit. Not that you die in one hit at like level 3 and 4, but like 1 and 2, it's pretty spooky and touch and go whether you're going to survive or not. But I like level 5, and then also I think just getting extra attack, your cantrips are a little more powerful, and things like that. Everything just kind of seems to mesh well for having a themed character at level 5. And so and if I can be in a game where they're just like, you're going to start at 5th level and you get one like uncommon or common magic item, to be like, this is what you found in the past. That's my favorite, because then I can like, not only can I make a themed character, I can have a piece of equipment that kind of augments that theme as well. Like if I wanted to do, I think I wanted to do like a Yuan-Ti sorcerer who had like a python staff that could turn into a snake or something. And so it's like that magic item could really augment the rest of your character. So I don't know. For me, it's 5th level. But lately I've been wanting to play like 10th level stuff, because I don't realize that I haven't, I think because my Warforged Eldritch Knight he's almost level 9, but we're getting to that point where I'm like, no, I think I want to try like tougher monsters and have more abilities and things like that. But, the one game that I played where we started at 10th level, I played a gnome wizard, and I was so confused as to what my character could do, because he almost had too much. So that kind of brings it full circle going back. I think level 5 is the sweet spot for me. And level 1 feels like you're learning D&D, and Jordan knows how to play D&D, so I want to play level 5. And case in point, like I just finished the Mistress of Modules game last Sunday, and I was a level 4 Fey Warlock. And I wanted to be level 5 so bad, because I'm like, all right, I fire Eldritch Blast. All right, I get 1 Eldritch Blast. I was like, I just really want to be able to like fire off 2 of these. Like, I wish we were level 5, but it made sense for the game while we were level 4. So.
Yeah. And I think my agreement with all of that is perfect, because it's the idea that I did some 10th level stuff where we started out, but to jump into a one shot, it's very clunky to figure out how that character works because, like you said, there's so much going on. Like, I want to play from 5th and get to 10th because by then it's going to feel nice and organic. The character's going to feel good. I'm gonna know all the things that they normally do. But just throwing you in the deep end, or even think of like a 15th level character.
Mm-hmm.
Like, all right, make a 15th level. We're gonna play a one shot. That's gonna be really crazy. So
yeah,
I think I'm with you there. So let me flip it a little bit then. So what about, as Jordan, the dungeon master? You've created a lot of games now. You've played with a lot of different your groups. Where's the sweet spot for starting your campaigns right now? Are you still leaning towards keeping them at 1? Are you leaning in towards start them at 3, which I see a lot of people do? Or you can start pushing for some of these higher level campaign starts?
Boy, that's a good question. And I haven't really given that a ton of thought, but I'm thinking back to my Hot Springs Island game. I didn't want to start them at level 1. So I started them at level 2. And then by the end of that first session, they were level 3. So I think that's if I have to run a game, I feel like level 1 is learning to play D&D and you're too fragile, but like having a game of level 2 and then instantly getting that ratification of going to 3, that's what I would do. Unless I'm writing like a one shot, like my Dragon on the Mount one shot, I think they started at level 4, level 3, level 4, because it just kind of made sense to have that survivability. But yeah, like I'm looking at running Ghosts of Saltmarsh, or even Tomb of Annihilation, maybe with my Sunday group. We're going to see if they are interested in that. And that starts at level 1, but I think specifically I'm going to say, no, we're just going to start at like level 2, level 3. Yeah. So I don't know. Cool. Yeah, that's where, what about you? Like if you're running a game, are you starting them at level 3, or do you want high level stuff? Or?
So I think I finally ran out my need to have all the characters fairly lowish level as I began to learn the rules. So as you know, you've been in a lot of my one shots. I've had a lot of people in the channel here have been in my one shots. And I like to start in that range. I did 1s and 3s and maybe a little bit higher than that, just because. But now that I feel really comfortable with understanding mechanics, I understand the rules really well. I'm pretty good about what the characters can do for the most part. I think now I'm starting to lean towards that one that you'd mentioned at the very beginning of the conversation, this idea of 5+1 magic item kind of thing. I think that is the sweet spot for me right now to start some of these upcoming campaign ideas that I have. And I think that's where I would want to start putting people, because I want to start getting into that cool part of the monster manual. I want to start getting into that cool part of the CR area. And then eventually probably even start to move. I want to get into maybe a high level game of some sort at some point, and maybe start us off at a 15 or a 12 or 15 area to see what does a campaign look like when you're starting in that spot, and then going on and look at that part of the monster manual, look at that part of Mordecai's Tome, Volo's Guide, all those things, because we don't get to those abilities. We don't get to see those character abilities right now. We don't get to see the monsters that fight those things. We don't get to bring out the big bad dragon, you know, the really good ancient dragons. We don't get any of that stuff when I'm always playing that low 1st to 3rd to maybe 4th level. So I've got to break my bubble of staying in that 3rd to 5 area as I play. So I want to make a push to maybe get some of that higher level stuff.
I remember and I remember Wizards of the Coast saying, I think it was, Wizards of the Coast. They did a survey, and it was like, this was in an answer to people asking the questions like, why don't you make high level content? Like, you're not making level 15 to 20 content, so we don't have the ability to play levels 15 to 20. But they did a survey, and I think the majority of people, like, there's so many, not the majority, sorry, let me go back. There are a lot of people out there that play D&D like, hey, Lucian, do you want to play D&D? Let's make level 4 characters. We'll take them to level 6 through a mini campaign, and then we're done. Yeah. And so later on, it's like, then later on somebody else says, hey, Jordan, do you want to play D&D? And I grab my friends and we start at level 5 and we go to level 7 and we're done. Yeah. Like, not everybody plays level 1 to 20 or level, 10 to 20 or something like that. So that was kind of their argument for saying, like, we could make high level content, but it seems like a lot of people play this way, where they just kind of run like a 2-level campaign. And also the catch-22 of that is a lot of people say like, well, people do that because you don't make high level content. So if you're not making level 20 content, then that's the content that people are going to play. They're going to open up their Tales of the Yawning Portal, their Ghosts of Saltmarsh, and they're going to play a level 4 adventure,
Right.
So.
Well, I think in front loading it, I think, Lucian's opinion is smart, just because D&D still feels like the biggest game that's bringing in new players to the TTRPG scene. So we're talking about the players that have never played a single TTRPG out there, a tabletop role-playing game anywhere else. They've been hearing about it on media stuff. They've been hearing about it in pop culture. They've been hearing about it from their friends, their family, or whatever, and they've decided this is the year they're going to jump into it. It's almost all of them are coming to D&D first because that's the thing that's out there. So it just makes sense that you don't throw a 20th level character at, person who's brand new to Dungeons and Dragons and role playing in general. I think, and I front loading it. And I think that's what happens is we start those campaigns and they last for a year or two, but that's the longest you can keep a running schedule of players going. Most of the time their schedules change. People have kids, different stuff happens. And now your group has to split up or change time so you can bring in new people. But if you're going to bring in new people, you start thinking, well, why doesn't everybody just start characters at this level? Because we got the new people, that kind of thing. DM burnout happens. So you've been playing from 5 to 7, but now the campaign storyline kind of fizzles. Now where do you go? So, I mean, and you've got your characters to 10, your home group to 10, which is really good. I was like, that's pretty good. They went from 1 to 10, right?
Yep.
You got them from 1 to 10, but
that's taken like 2 years because of how infrequently we play. Like that's taken a long time to get them there. And going forward, I think I'm going to be a little more lax about when they level up. So that maybe they can get to 15 or 20 and we can try out some of that content. So
cool. So yeah, I think that was just a question that popped up that made me think about where I like starting campaigns now, because that was our first session. It felt really good. The players are really getting into character. Everybody's doing funny, cool stuff, trying to figure out what their personality is going to be like. We fought some just general undead in the jungle, which is always how you start out to Annihilation, is fighting some undead in the jungle, which is always good. Lots of jungle references, lots of, 80s music running through our heads, or Vietnam flashback kind of stuff, or whatever, when you're thinking about trying to trudge through the jungle and getting attacked or ambushed by stuff. So pretty fun. The game's pretty fun. We did find some chewingas. That's one of the best parts of Tomb of Annihilation. If you don't know what that is, I won't spoil it, because hopefully if you play Tomb of Annihilation, you find out what a chewinga is, and you'll say, oh, that's why Lucian was super excited about it, because chewingas are super cool. So we ran into that, which was fun. Other than that, Thursday night, then we turn around one more night later, and I play in our second episode of Horde of the Dragon Queen, which we've been playing. And this is my second level Gnome Artificer. So I'm play testing the current rules for Artificer. I'm going to go the Artillerist route. I was talking to Graybeard. He's playing in another campaign. He's got a little bit higher level one. He's going to do some Artillerist stuff too. So I haven't seen too many people playing the Alchemist one yet. But the Artillerist,
that's the one I'm really interested in, is the Alchemist. I like that one a lot. I want to be a support Artificer. Yeah.
So second level, first level, I wouldn't say you necessarily feel like an Artificer yet. You feel more like a generic hero at that point. You've got a little bit of magic going on. You've got a little bit of ability starting, but you're kind of in the middle of things, and you feel really wishy-washy to me. Like you're not leaning one way or the other on the iconic scale. Like if you're a ranger and you have a bow and a pet, that stuff comes pretty early on. Or, it feels like those other classes where you're waiting for that third level drop of an ability to really make you feel like, okay, I'm choosing my divinity, or I'm choosing, my next fighter class, or I'm choosing what type of thief I'm going to be. It's at that third level where it really, some of the classes are at second level, some are at third level, some start at first level. They have a big mixture of them. Artificers at third, where that drops. But second level, you get a cool ability called Infuse Items. And that's really cool. Replicating magic items and doing little things with infusions. You get the feel. This was the first session where I got the nice Artificer feel. So right at second level, I'm already starting to feel different than the clerics and the fighters and the thieves and the warlocks and whatever in my party. I feel like an Artificer is different than that. So that was really cool. So once I hit second level, that felt good. That felt refreshing to me. The other thing I liked a lot is that eventually you're going to start to have so many different options. I could see where people could start to get, like if you're the type of person that is presented with too many options, you kind of shut down. This is going to be a class, I think eventually you'll have a little bit of that. So if you don't want a class that you have to make a lot of choices and decisions, you might steer clear of Artificer because there's a lot going on. You're talking about what spells you're going to do. You're talking about your infusions. You're talking about your turrets and all your abilities you get with that. And there's a lot of stuff you're trying to think and decide on as you go, and redoing your spells every day, that kind of stuff. So it's definitely for those people that like lots of options. Keep that in mind. I liked it. Now, the one thing that I thought was funny about this session, I was going to bring up, the thing that made me think, okay, we got to talk about on the Saturday morning D&D show. So this campaign is a brand new DM with all veteran players. Okay. So the one thing that happens right away with all veteran players is they can quickly get ahead of a DM or do things that kind of take the DM off foot quickly. Like when there was a group of bad guys coming up and our group came up and tried to bluff our way immediately in through talking. And we're really good about, because these are veteran players, about how they were coming up with how to talk or make it sound like we were cultists. We were wearing the cultist garb. And so we jumped right into it, but he's being a new DM, doesn't have the improv skills yet to keep up with the speed or pace of veteran players, just slinging stuff out there. You know what I mean? Just like really being on top of their character dialogue. And I know the hardest thing for a brand new dungeon master is the NPC dialogue and keeping it straight, keeping things going, and being able to react and understand or get information across to your players. So I thought it was funny. Have you played for Jordan, when you played your game, you were always, as the GM, were you always the most knowledgeable in the game, in the groups that you ran? Or have you ever ran a group that was more knowledgeable than you in the game?
I haven't ran a group where people are more knowledgeable than me, just because it came back to when Jordan wanted to play D&D. He realized that if he wanted to play, nobody else was going to be the DM because nobody else was as interested in it as I was. So if I wanted to play this game, I was going to have to run this game, and I was going to have to, and I like going into the rules and really understanding them and stuff. But no, so it would be interesting, and I hopefully will get into a game at Gen Con or something where I can actually play with some other people that know the game a little bit more. But no, so now maybe I take that back because I went to Adventure League quite a bit. And those people had very, for example, I think it's a Pathfinder rule and it's an alternate rule in D&D 5e. But if you go sideways with your movement on a grid, so going forward and backwards and left and right, that's 5 feet. But if you go sideways, that's 5, and then it's 10 feet or 15 feet. So it goes 5 feet for the first move, and then if you go another diagonal, it's an extra 5 feet. So you go 5, 15, 20, 30. Does that make sense? Like you kind of
add. Because the diagonal works out mathematically to be slightly more than.
Right. And so they do that to hinder people from like abusing going sideways in combat. And that was the first time I had ever heard of it. And that was one of those things like everybody at the table agreed, like, no, this is how you do it. And you're playing wrong. And I'm like, I've never played like this. Just like 5 feet is 5 feet. So that happens. I don't think that answered your question, but like that's something that popped into my mind. But
well, and the reason it was kind of a trick question because I kind of knew the answer. So it was like, I was going to let you get it out. But me too. Like I was a DM for 5th edition, and although the players I gathered together had played Dungeons and Dragons before, they had not played 5th edition. So everything I've done as the dungeon master, I've kind of been the one that's known the most about the rules. Not everything, but like I knew more or enough, and that's why you're that's sometimes why we're the dungeon master. But I forget now, and me and you we give tips to new dungeon masters that are out there. It is very possible in this day and age for a group of veteran players to say, hey, we'd really like to play Dungeons and Dragons. Let's find somebody to be the run it. And then somebody volunteers and they're newer. right?
Yeah.
So they're going to be a kind of a newish to being a DM, but yet all their players are veterans. All their players have been playing characters. All their players have all this stuff. That's a very different set of tips and tricks you're going to give to that GM than you give to the ones that were like us, where we were the main people gathering people around. We knew a little bit more about the game than them. We were going to be teaching the game to them, and they had to learn their player stuff, but we kind of knew the other stuff. And I realized that maybe there's a deficiency out there in talking to those GMs and those dungeon masters who have a veteran group, but they're not the veterans. Because I bet that's a little bit different on what you want to do.
It's intimidating too. I have 3 players in my Sunday group that have expressed interest in being a dungeon master, but they don't want me to play in their game.
Oh.
And it's not because they don't like me or anything like that. It's just like they're so worried that they're going to get a rule wrong and Jordan will be there to correct them. Even though I very specifically said, I'm like, it's your game. If you decide that goblins can fly, goblins can fly. If you decide that they have 4 opportunity attacks, they have 4 opportunity attacks. Like, it doesn't matter to me. I'm not going to be the guy that stops you and say, actually, that's not how I play. But regardless of that, they're still very intimidated by it because they just know that Jordan understands the rules on a level that they have not dived into yet. So there's that.
Yeah, and so that's what happened in this game. So he's our dungeon master for the second game is brand new. It's the first time he's running a game. He's been playing in some of the other games. Like, in fact, he's been playing on Indoor Adventures channel. He's been playing some games. I think he's going to run another. He's got to DM another game on their channel coming up. But he is new, so he is learning it. Mm-hmm. He's like he makes a lot of comments like, I never have to think about this when I'm playing the game normally. Like, yes, and it's like, that's all perfectly normal. And so we ran into this very typical thing that happened in our session. There are a couple of cultists at a campfire and there's some kobolds and our group finds them and tries to bluff our way into pretending we're cultists too, because we whooped the other cultists. We took their clothes, put them on, and we're trying to pretend to be cultists so we can find out what's going on. The very typical Trojan horse, go in and find information, pretend to be the enemy, get information kind of tactic. And so in his mind, though, as a new GM, I think he thought we were going to sneak up and fight this group because that's what we had done in the other one. He wasn't quite ready or prepared for a big drawn out discussion of bluffing and trying to fit in and like this big RP session part of it. I think he was ready for a battle. So that threw him off a tiny bit, but then he recovered and he sent the kobolds off. And then the cultists, he decided, well, I think he wanted it to be a fight. So the kobolds come back, they sneak back up and they start a fight. So we're fighting the kobolds and he wants to make these 2 cultists run away so we can't get any more information from them. So I'm thinking in my mind in 2 points. One, on my turn, I'm thinking, okay, what's my character supposed to be doing? How do I play my personality, my character? But the second thing is I'm analyzing how he's playing the game and I'm thinking, what would I be doing if I'm a GM? And I'm thinking, okay, this makes sense. Like, I'm not ready for them to learn too much about the cultist plan. So I need to get the cultists away from them so they don't get too much information, right? So something has to happen there. So rightfully, he has an attack happen and the 2 cultists are going to run away. What he doesn't plan on is one of the players decides, well, I'm chasing after him. I'm not letting them get away. So it's this point of the GM wants something to happen narratively so that we can just get them off scene.
Yeah.
But the player's chasing them so they can't get off scene. So then there's he's like, well, he's going to keep running. And he's getting kind of hit and pinged a little bit of damage. And he's like, well, I'll dash. But he realizes that all the spell ranges are so long that dashing's not going to get this guy away. He's going to die too soon or he's going to get captured or whatever. And it's all theater of the mind. And so we're just having to ask him, so where's this guy now? Now he's 70 feet from you. Okay, I cast this. He's like, okay, he dashes again. Now he's this far from you. And he's like, but we're still hitting him. We're still pinging him, whatever. And he's finally like, well, he turns a corner and you can't see him. And I was like, that was the quintessential. And I've been in that position and I was laughing on the inside of the DM who's just like, damn you players, let me do what I want to do.
Yeah.
Stop messing with me. That's it. I put a corner in there. You can't see him anymore. So the player continues to go up to the corner, forces the issue. And he's like, that's it. Fine. When you come around the corner, there's a whole new big group of things that you've just ran into and they see you. And there's no going to be bluffing here. We're not even going to roll for bluffing. This is it. You want to chase that person. I'm going to show you what happens when you chase that person. And I'm laughing because I'm thinking I've done that same thing where I've introduced something and I wanted it to go a certain way in the session. Maybe it's to give some information. Maybe it's to set the scene a little bit, but then the players take and run with it a different way that I wasn't ready for. And now I'm just trying to get it away. Like, don't focus on the wagon, guys. I just put the wagon on the side of the road because I thought it would be cool while describing the scene of you're going down the road. There's a wagon and a farmer. There's stuff on this side, this side. It's nothing. It's fluff to make you think, hey, we're in the countryside and we're going down the road. Let's check the wagon. Let's search the wagon, pull up the boards of the wagon. There's got to be something hidden here because in their mind, the DM doesn't put anything in front of them that they're not supposed to investigate.
Yeah.
So that was that moment. I was just kind of laughing a little bit. So now to bring that all around, the one thing I noticed about that is quickly theater of the mind got out of hand, right? So it starts out with a very easy to probably keep in everybody's mind. There's a fire pit. There's some people around the fire. A fight breaks out. Everybody's fairly close. Maybe some people are moving this or that way, but no big deal. And I don't think he's ever had trouble of dealing it. But all of a sudden it turns into a complex battle because you have several people running 300, 400, 500 feet off and then turning a corner of some sort. You've got kobolds that are on different angles firing from different spots. He's having to try to remember where these things are. And we're constantly asking him, how far are things? Because we have spells or abilities that are very specific. I can't throw my hammer and get disadvantage unless I'm only 20 feet away, because after that I got to roll a disadvantage. So it's very important for me to know exactly where things are so I'm not getting advantage or disadvantage. And all these players are playing that same way. They want to know how far are things. So he's getting really confused all of a sudden.
Now, do you think that's because you are used to that and that's how you play is with a map and grid? Because I was like, you could easily give him a bunch of players that are used to theater of the mind that might not be asking those specific questions. Like, well, I know that my spell is 120 feet. I need to know, is he within 80 or 130 feet, you know?
Yeah. And I think for sure for me, because I'm such a huge tactical map person, but it's because I'm also trying to fine tune the different ability. And I'm really concerned about, do I get advantage or not advantage and where are things? And I just think he wasn't prepared to try to keep in your mind where the spots of everything was. Because in theater of the mind, you don't have to have a grid, but you do need one thing. You do need to know distances, right? And so a trick I have done with theater of the mind, and I was going to ask you how you do this, because I know you do theater of the mind stuff, is even though I won't have a map, as a dungeon master, when I have my sheet where I'm marking down at a table or I'm doing a theater of the mind style, and I have the hit points marked down of the creatures they're fighting. I usually have them in a line so I can just mark them off with a pencil type thing. What I will do is I will pick one of the players who's at the top of the initiative, and I draw a circle and I put their initials on my piece of paper. And then from there, as the battle goes on, I just mark with a line and an arrow, this person, another circle and initials, is 20 feet away from that person. So at a glance, it's more like a linear thing that just shows me distance from this thing and this thing, A to B. And I can look at all these different little things without drawing a map out, without trying to remember anything else. But now I can say, okay, this person's exactly 35 feet. Then they dash, so that's another 60. So now he's 95 feet. And I have that just written in a line on my piece of paper notes so I can keep track of. Because if I don't, my rangers, my people who have those long hitting spells aren't getting all of the stuff that they need, or all of the advantages that they have of being a very long range person. Or we start to get into, well, are they within 5 feet because I want to use my reaction to do a sentinel, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. How close am I to this person? How close am I to that? There's so many rules about spacing in Dungeons and Dragons. I feel like you have to be really good about knowing where things are. You don't need a map to show it, but you need to know how many feet are between one thing and another,
I think.
But
I disagree only because you're so, like, you even said that you guys are min-maxing your characters, and you're making these really awesome stuff. Like, so you need to know what is and what isn't within 5 feet of you, where a lot of people just play. And I don't like, sometimes I'll jot down a little map in the corner of my paper, so I can be like, okay, no, they're here. And just so I don't forget about this guy to the north that's hiding in the bushes, that's going to attack you on round 2 or something like that. But for the most part, I feel like you can just say, you know, like as a perfect example is we were doing Theater of the Mind, and I said, hey, I want to use Fairy Fire. It hits everybody within a 20-foot cube. Can I hit it so that I don't hit my ally, but I hit the 4 cultists? And the GM was like, no. Because in her mind, she's just like, no, you can hit them all. I'm like, all right, then I hit all of them. And like, you can make split-second decisions like that in your mind. You're just like, no, I'm not going to allow you to do that. Or yeah. Whereas if we're playing on a grid, there's no arguing with the DM, I guess, because you could say like, no, I can finagle the spot where I cast a spell here so that I only hit those guys and I don't hit my ally. And so I don't know, like, going back to the cultists are running away. And like how we need to know how far they are. How Jordan would read that is, say the cultists run away into the woods. I'm assuming there's woods. I don't know. I just kind of pictures that in my mind. But they're 50 feet, 60 feet away. And you're like, well, the player should be asking, like, not how far they are, but can I see them? Where are they going, kind of a thing? And I shouldn't say the player should ask that, because everybody can play however they want to play. There's no wrong way to play. But in that instance, I would say roll a perception check. Yes, you can still see them, but they're hidden by the trees. They have a +3 AC. Do you still want to fire your bow? Yes. Okay, you fire your bow. He's actually slow now because you got him in the leg. And so he's, you know, like, does the DM want to allow the players to catch up with these, or do you want to create a situations where the cultists can get away? And they might chase them, and then you create, and there's rules for doing chases and things like that. But I would not say that a DM has to know exactly how far things are from everything else, because you can play a Theater of the Mind game where, you know, not to poo-poo on your entire argument, but I think it's good to remember that you are very crunchy and you like a table, and this is how you're used to playing. And so when you're used to playing like that, you want to know, is that guy 60 feet away or not? Because I need to know if my arrow can hit him. So without disadvantage.
And I think what's interesting about what you said is a advanced Dungeon Master's way of handling that, whereas the beginning Dungeon Master, because none of that what you just said is written in the player's handbook or the Dungeon Master's guide. They don't even know that's because that's how I would have handled it. Like, if I want the cultists to run away, I would have said they got 20 feet in the woods and you can't see them. Like,
exactly.
It's bushes, it's dark, there's all kinds of stuff going on. You might be able to track them, but that would be the way. But I think that's us as veteran Dungeon Masters knowing how to handle a situation that we want to go a certain way. Or like you said, if you're going to run Theater of the Mind, I think we all agree when we like that style and we all start that way, that it's going to be a little wishy-washy, right? It's just going to be hey, can I get I want to do Fairy Fire on all of the bad guys. And the DM's going to go, well, you probably can get 3, but not 5.
Yeah.
You can probably get 3 of them all. They're close enough. And then we're all just like, okay, we'll go with that. And nobody's really concerned so much about, but you've got to be ready to answer that kind of thing just off. And we all have to suspend some reality, which we do because we're playing elves and dragonborns and whatever. We're suspending reality as we go. And I just feel like, and you are absolutely right, I am super biased because I am a very tactical player and I run my game very tactical.
I love a grid. I prefer a grid over Theater of the Mind because I too like to know when I am within 5 feet of an enemy with an ally, so I can use Sentinel and I can use all of this stuff. Or like my Warforged Eldritch Knight, like I'm all about shoving things 10 feet and pulling things 10 feet and shoving it, making it prone and things like that. Like I want to know those conditions are applied, and I want to be able to look at the grid and say, I did this, and so.
Yeah. Well, speaking of those cool things you want to do, what did Jordan do in gameplay this week? What were you doing? What were you running? What were you playing?
So I played Dungeon Crawl Classics, which was a lot of fun, and that's a whole thing that maybe I'll talk about next week because I'm really curious how this Tuesday's game's going to go. But in short, and what we'll kind of talk about next week is like when playing. Basically, I have one player specifically that loves Dungeon Crawl Classics, and he was telling me he was like, I love it almost as much as D&D. Like, I think this is just
the one that went out and bought the book already, and okay.
He's really all about it, and the other ones are kind of wishy-washy on it. And then at the end of the night, one of these wishy-washy players was just flat out like, I don't think I would play a long campaign of this. Like, it's fine for the one shots that we're doing, but like if you were gonna say, hey, we're gonna play like an 8-month campaign of DCC, he's like, I'm out. I don't like it. And so, and I guess I teased that, but I want to talk about that a little bit later. Like, or maybe we can just talk about it right now, and I'll
got time?
Yeah. Okay. So I've got another topic, but we'll talk about that for later. But what do you do when your players don't get the same enjoyment out of a game that you do? Like Jordan, like takes, and I guess I've been really fortunate because I did my Kids on Bikes game with my other group, and they loved it. But like, what do you get when you're just like, hey guys, like Jordan loves Dungeon Crawl Classics, but I can't find those like-minded people. And I put this question out on Twitter, and I had a lot of people say like, don't force a player to like a game. Like Dungeon Crawl Classics isn't for everybody. But it got me thinking because one of my players was kind of like, well, I've never played this game before. And I was looking at him like, well, it's a lot like D&D. You roll a D20 to hit. When you hit, you roll damage. If you do enough damage, you kill the guy. Like that's the basics of D&D, and that's the basics of DCC. So it's not that different. But they were kind of not under the impression, but like we're almost fighting me that they're like, but it is a different game and things like that. And one of my players pointed out that and I was going to see if you agree with this, but Dungeons and Dragons has roughly a 60% success ratio. Like you are more likely to succeed, to hit, to do a skill, to do whatever you need to roll a d20 for. You are 60% likely to succeed over the course of like average rolls. Like sometimes you might have an 80% success rate, sometimes it might be a 40%, but for the most part, you're encouraged to win. Whereas Dungeon Crawl Classics really feels like a 50% win ratio. Like it is up to luck. And I think that's what my players really didn't like about it, is that so much of the game was about luck. But we were talking that it's almost kind of like gambling in a way. And I'm not a gambler, but I guess I can understand why people do gamble, because that when you have a 40% chance of succeeding and you roll that natural 20 to do extra damage and to kill the end boss, that feels so much more rewarding than hitting with your plus 11 Eldritch Blast,
Yeah.
And I think back to my Warforged Eldritch Knight. He's got a plus 10 to hit right now. Next level, when I turn 9, my proficiency goes up. I have a plus 11 to my sword attacks. And that boggles my mind, where I'm like, I can hit everything. Like, I very rarely miss at this level. Earlier on, I missed quite a bit, but now that I'm level 9, like, I'm just not going to miss very often. Whereas Dungeon Crawl Classics, I feel, keeps you on your toes. And maybe it also is I'm kind of stream of consciousness right now, but maybe it also is a Dungeon Master thing, where the two players that didn't really care for DCC have never been Dungeon Masters. And I'm like, you've never been in that situation where you get a really awesome group of monsters and you're like, this is going to annihilate, or this not annihilate, but like, this is going to really test my players. And then they just walk all over it because it's the easiest encounter ever. Because players are really powerful in Dungeons and Dragons.
There it is.
Yeah.
That's where I was going with it. So the two things you said there that I thought immediately. So number one, you back up to the biggest statement ever on the show. I think the number one killer of campaigns is exactly, there's a lot of interest in a certain subject from a dungeon master, but he or she is not getting the buy-in or the same amount of energy and excitement from the players. They're just not into I want to do dirigibles and steampunk and all this stuff. And they're like, no, dude, we want elves and gnomes and Lord of the Rings. We don't want that. So when that starts to happen, or the dungeon master wants to do something new, but the players want to continue with what they've had, campaigns can end. If there's some type of, not friction, but there's just not a connection between the two of, We both want to do these same things. I think that's the part where campaigns struggle. So if you're ever in a part where you think your campaign's struggling, I bet it's because of that. It's either your energy level for continuing on where the storyline isn't very high, but your players are, or you are really into whatever this new thing is, and they're just like, I don't know, I don't really want to be in a city. Can't we go out and adventure in a dungeon somewhere? Or can't we do a high seas adventure? Do we really need to stay in Waterdeep, for another month or, whatever?
And now that you put it that way, like it makes a lot of sense. Because if I had somebody who came up to me and was just like, Jordan, Call of Cthulhu, it's the best game ever. You like Dungeon Crawl Classics. It's super brutal like that. You're going to go insane. You're going to die. It's going to be amazing. And then we play it and I'm kind of like, I don't really care about Lovecraft. Like,
it's cool. It's
it's fun. I'll play for a little bit, and so it's kind of the same thing, I think. Yeah. But this is more of a mechanical setting as opposed to a storyline setting,
So here's the second thing that I came up with as you were talking. So the second thing was, it's the difference between playing superheroes and playing regular Joe. And I'm betting that player or those players that aren't enjoying it, they love the feeling of being superhero-ish power. In Dungeons 5e, Dungeons & Dragons 5e, we gloss that over with swords and sorcery and spells. But the reality of it is, you are a superhero in that world. You are a force to be reckoned with as a 6th level whatever. I mean, you are a ground-moving, shaking type person. But in DCC, you're lucky to make it out of the funnel. And if you did, you're still kind of just a farmer at that point with maybe one other thing. And so I'm betting, I think the people that lean towards, I like DCC or MCC, I think it's the people that like to play the underdog, the people that like to play the normal person who gets thrown in crazy situations and what would happen. They're going to love that. But the people who want to be powerful, and when they swing their sword, 3 things fall and my spell fires off into the distance and does this huge explosion, they're going to want Dungeons & Dragons 5e because that's exactly what it is. It's this, you get to be a hero, and in DCC, you get to survive.
Yep. And that's one of the things I love about it, is just so brutal. And I think I like that so much that it was weird to me when they were just like, we don't like that at all. And I'm like, but it's brutal. Like, it's so, I don't know. There's just something raw about it. I was like, it's so good. And they were just like, no, Jordan. Like, and specifically, we're talking about magic. If you roll, because you roll a d20 whenever you want to cast a spell. And if you roll under an 11 to 1, you forget the spell for the day and it didn't happen. So I try to cast Magic Missile and I roll a 6. I don't cast Magic Missile. And on top of that, I've forgotten it and I can't cast it again. And but it trains you to be like, magic is not training. Well, yeah, it trains you. It helps you learn the game that magic is really scarce and important. You're going to cast that spell when you absolutely need to cast that spell. You're not casting it to frivolously just be like, oh yeah, there's not, let's use my prestidigitation to light a candle, because magic is scary. Why would I use magic to light a candle when I can just light it with a match? Magic is scary. If I roll a 1 on that prestidigitation to light that candle, I could grow a 3rd arm. This is not cool. But he was coming from a D&D 5e standpoint where he was rolling and it's just well, you lost your spell. And it's well, then what good am I if I can't cast spells? I'm like, that's what you kind of have to figure out. You need to use that spell, cast that spell when you most need it, not when you're just, oh, we're fighting an orc, I better cast my most damaging spell. But that was a weird concept for him.
Yeah. I think another good analogy too for D&D 5e is so good about being very character driven and very over the top in some ways. It's kind of like watching anime versus a cartoon. Okay. Right? They're both drawn in a certain way, but anime is that bigger bombastic, that bigger things are happening. The each character is super defined and very different from the others, and they have a lot of uniqueness amongst them. Whereas the other one is more of just a regular old TV show, and everybody's very similar, and they might have one little thing that makes them different than everything else, but there's not a lot that makes you different than the other thing, and there's not a lot that makes you different from just a regular crowd of people. But D&D is so different in that way. They're so good about the thief is very different than the fighter, and the fighter is very different than the cleric, and the cleric can be very different than the paladin. They're just bigger than life characters. They're superheroes with costumes, and when you go into a town or a village, they're the villagers look like villagers. None of your players play like a villager. Like now, if we played Dungeons & Dragons 5e and all of us were villagers and we went around and did stuff, I think they would get that same thing. To me, DCC is you're a villager and you happen to be carrying a sword, or you happen to be able to cast a spell or two, but that's it. You're a villager, hands down, your entire life. You are not going to be 105 hit pointed barbarian at that point. You know, it's just like, and so I think there will be players that just don't get that. Now, like I said, I love it. I like the idea of playing Mad Max. I like the idea of playing the underdog. I like the idea that in DCC, creatures are deadly. A zombie coming after that party is a very real thing. A zombie kind of running at your D&D 5e party, I don't even think they care. You know, like they're just like, we can kill that. No big deal.
Yeah.
But I think the consequences, I think you're right about pointing out the success rates and the failure rates, or even the survival aspect of it, like tracking foods and waters and dehydrations, and that is a little bit bigger on some games than others. D&D gets glossed over quite a bit, and I just feel like you have your video game, version that's the action shooter, or the action RPG is Dungeons and Dragons 5e, whereas DCC is the strategy game, or the RTS, or the turn-based strategy game, where more realism is more fun. And this is more about just, Diablo style loot explosion, bloodbath, killing everything around us and doing all that kind of stuff. So it doesn't surprise me that you have one or two players that are like, I don't know if I'm into DCC.
So we'll see what Tuesday is, because we're going to finish our Sailors on the Starless Sea, and then they're going to level up to, some of them will be level 1, some of them will be level 2. And then I think at level 2, they'll start to feel like they're like, okay, we have enough hit points to survive a couple of hits, kind of a thing. Yeah. Whereas right now they can pretty much get hit pretty quickly. So we've gone over, so we're going to end our show there. Thank you guys so much for coming out to the Saturday morning D&D show and listening to us rant about games and news. If you would like to, we would very much appreciate a 5-star rating on iTunes. It helps get the show out there. It helps people find the show. And it just would mean a lot to us. So if you don't mind doing that, think about that. And there are links in the doobly-doo on the... I'll put a link in the show notes, as well as the YouTube comments and stuff like that. So if you guys are interested, that would be awesome. Anything else before we bounce out of here, sir?
That's it. It was a great show. Had lots of stuff to talk about. I'm already excited for the upcoming week of game playing. It's going to be good.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. Next Sunday is Easter, so I'm not playing games. So I'll probably just have more Dungeon Crawl Classics to listen to, or to rant about. So it'll be awesome. But anyway, we'll take care, everybody, and we will see you next Saturday with another episode of the Saturday Morning D&D Show. Goodbye.
Bye.